welcome to Tuesday Live. I am Omini Oden. I'll start tonight's program by asking, how well are you living up to the present day reality? The coronavirus pandemic that has redefined human interaction. How well are you observing the stay at home and the containment of the virus? Life, they say, is for the living. Better still, prevention is better than cure. Global deaths from coronavirus has passed 75,000 mark, for which countries like Italy and Spain are the worst hit. At present, Nigeria has recorded 6 deaths with more than 200 cases. The figure, medical experts believe, could escalate if people take for granted the Stay Safe campaign for refusal to comply with government directive with the lockdown. You recall President Muhammadu Buhari in his broadcast on COVID-19 was quoted to say, "We must all see this as our national and patriotic duty to control and contain the spread of this virus. I will therefore ask all of us affected by this order to put aside our personal comfort to safeguard ourselves and fellow human beings. This common enemy can only be controlled if we all come together and obey scientific and medical advice." End of quote. The World Health Organization and United Nations are commending Nigeria's effort in curtailing the coronavirus pandemic. There are much more with synergy and intensified government programs that include palliatives to cushion the impact of the lockdown on the citizenry. It is in furtherance of these that Nigeria and the United Nations have jointly launched a basket fund to provide financial, logistics and technical support to Nigeria in the fight against the COVID-19. How well do Nigerians understand the good intentions and actions of government? Are there reasons for any misgivings, especially plans of inviting Chinese medical team to complement on ongoing efforts by the government? Answers and more after this background report by Joy Ken Abakwea.
From the first signs that coronavirus was becoming an epidemic to when it was officially declared a global pandemic, the federal government of Nigeria had started planning preventive, containment and curative measures, mobilizing various instruments to confront what has now become both a medical emergency and an economic crisis.
Protective equipment.
A presidential task force was immediately set up to develop a workable national response strategy to be reviewed on a daily basis, relying on professional guardians from the health sector to fight and control the spread. Educational institutions were shut down, religious and public gatherings banned in worst-hit areas. 15 billion naira was immediately released to Lagos State Government and the NCDC to scale up health facilities and improve on contact tracing to tackle the spread of the virus. To stop its importation, the federal government had earlier ordered the closure of borders and improved security in the areas. The Central Bank of Nigeria also introduced policy measures to cushion the economic impact of the pandemic. These include 50 billion naira credit facility for households and small and medium-sized enterprises.
What we want to do is to see what can we do as a country to rescue our own situation so we don't go the direction many will go. It's not going to be easy, but we can only just assure our people that we are on top of it and that we'll resolve it and Nigerians will still be better for it.
In the wake of the increasing number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country, President Muhammadu Buhari, in a national broadcast, announced more steps and palliatives to contain the virus and ease the pains of citizens.
I have also directed that a similar moratorium be given to all federal government-funded loans issued by the Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, and the Nigerian Export-Import Bank. For the most vulnerable in our society, I have directed that the conditional cash transfers for the next 2 months be paid immediately.
These measures, experts say, have yielded positive results and even attracted commendations from the United Nations. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, led by its chairman, Boss Mustafa, visited Lagos to assess the level of infrastructure at the COVID-19 isolation centers, where the state government was commended for being proactive to containing the virus.
We are also working in collaboration with the World Health Organization for guidance on issues of standardization and global policies.
As Nigeria continues to sustain efforts towards flattening the curve and containing COVID-19, the presidency has also been engaging several communities to develop a sustainable plan on repositioning the economy, grow the non-oil sector, and turn the situation to opportunities. In Lagos, Joy Ken Abakuya, NTA News.
Joy Ken Abakuya's report sets the tone for the takeoff of the program tonight. It's Tuesday Live, and at some point, our phone lines will be displayed on the screen. And if you make your call and you raise your concerns, before doing this, please pull down the volume of your television set to avoid the echo. You can also be part of the conversation tonight through our Twitter handle at Tuesday Live NTA. Well, in keeping with the social distancing policy within the times, we are doing 2 studios in Abuja, and we shall also be going to our Ibadan Network Center. Within Abuja, we have right here with me the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngalale. Good to have you on the program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
National Coordinator, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Dr. Sani Aliyu. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
From our 24 News studio, we have Professor Nasefi Abdullahi Darma, former Director, National Planning Commission, and specialist on developing economics and public finance. Welcome to the program.
Yes.
From our Ibadan Network Center, we have Professor Oyewale Tomori, a Nigerian renowned virologist that worked with the World Health Organization. He is also, among many things, a fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Science and who does research in infectious disease, veterinary medicine, and public health. He is also an educational administrator and former Vice Chancellor of Redeemer University, Ogun State. Good to have you on the program, Prof.
Much.
Ben, we are good to go. Let me start with Dr. Aliyu. You have had a hectic day. You are coming from Lagos to inaugurate the Oniko Isolation Center. What are we expecting more after now?
So I must say we are making progress when it comes to isolation. Lagos in particular currently have more than 1,000 beds that they've identified. And usually with coronavirus, what happens is at the beginning, when you start having patients coming in, they usually have mild symptoms and they need to be isolated straight away. And then progressively over time, some of them might become more unwell. About 20% will become more unwell and require hospitalization. And then a smaller number, about 5%, will go on to require intensive care, oxygen, etc. So certainly the Lagos State Governor is doing the right thing. The key thing is to make sure that those that have positive results are isolated straight away so that they do not continue to transmit the infection. So we need to have really good accommodation because the numbers may go up. You can see what's happening in the United States, what's happening in Europe, etc. So the first stage is to make sure that anybody who has a positive result is isolated. And then you go after the contacts. You contact trace them, you ask them to isolate themselves, and then you monitor them for symptoms. And at the same time, as the weeks go by, some of those, as I said, will progress. The reason I think why we have a small number of deaths at the moment is because of the pattern of coronavirus infection. It takes a while. It usually takes at least 2-3 weeks before people become really sick. And I'm afraid the number of deaths may go up over the next subsequent weeks as more and more of those smaller cohort become sick and end up going on to intensive care. In terms of your question, where are we going next? Well, all I can say is Lagos is leading at the moment. FCT, here in FCT, we've also identified more than 1,000 beds in terms of isolation. Equipment is coming in. We have equipment coming in from China. Tomorrow we have a UN order that will be coming in the next few days as well. So we'll be kitting up our ICUs, intensive care units. We're also working very closely with the Nigeria Governors Forum I'm sure you would remember that we've asked, the Presidential Task Force has asked governors to please make sure they have at least 300 beds available in their state for isolation in the event that these numbers go up. But this is a serious infection. We need to be prepared. Testing is another area that we are also trying to improve. The NCDC, through their DG, is making huge strides in opening more and more laboratories. I know there was an assessment that went on in Kano and I think Kaduna, then followed by Maiduguri and Sokoto in the next coming days. We already have about 9 labs that are now testing. We started off about a week or so ago with only about 500 tests a day, but that number has really ramped up in the last few days, because for us to know where the problem is, we need to test and test and test.
Okay, have we gone beyond testing, isolation, and contact tracing?
Well, I'm afraid, if you say so, isolate, okay, test, contact trace, and treat. So we're doing both. We're doing all 4 really at the moment. But of course, we have to take things a stage at a time. You know, our health system is already weak. And all it needs is a little push and it will topple over. And that's why we're trying to prepare ourselves as well as prepare the states. The federal government is already investing significantly in the response, and our partners are also coming in, especially the private sector and the UN system. As you said, the UN basket will be quite considerable. The private sector funds will also be quite considerable, although both funds will not come into the government coffers, as I keep on saying, because what we'll be doing is working with them and giving them a shopping list. These are the things that we need. Let's have an ICU facility in Lokoja because they don't have ICU facilities. Can you construct a 10-bed or 20-bed ICU for us? Kano, they have a problem with isolation. Maybe they've got a lot of cases in the community. Can you construct a 100-bed isolation facility for us? That's the sort of thing that we'll be doing, rather than taking money from the private sector. We want in kind. Any sort of contribution, ideally, if it can be in kind, it makes the job easier for us, because there are certain equipments like ventilators, for instance, they're incredibly difficult to get now. Every country is going after ventilators. Liberia, for instance, they have only 1 ventilator in the entire country.
Up to now?
Yes, only 1. And we have 350, but that's grossly insufficient for a country the size of Nigeria. But our partners have already ordered, there will be about 50 ventilators coming into the country over the next few days through the UN system. And that's because of the ability of the United Nations to be able to intercede country to country and be able to get us the best deals. And that's why we want to partner with the private sector, and we want to partner with the multilaterals. And anybody who is willing to help our country in its time of need, it's very much welcome.
I'll come to you on other issues. Let me go to the SSA. Nigeria UN COVID-19 Basket Fund. Part of it is to enhance coordination, technical and financial support to the Presidential Task Force to prepare, prevent and respond to COVID-19 nationally. States national. Is there some kind of disconnect, or it is well coordinated?
It's a very important question, Armenian. I'm glad that you asked. Look, this virus is only going to be effectively tackled when you have the kind of hand-in-glove synergy between the federal government and the state governments that we have been able to achieve in many states. There are a few exceptions where the synergy is not quite what we want it to be. But I would say this. In very specific terms, my good friend alluded to, Dr. Aliu alluded to some of the progress that's been made on the public health side. I just want to add a little bit to that. Starting out with 5 laboratories, now at 9, right? Adding another one in Lagos, for example. Lagos now has 3, Osun has 1, Edo has 1, Oyo has 1, and of course Abuja. Now you're in Abakaliki in Ebonyi State also has 1. Now you have 5 more on stream. That's Port Harcourt in River State. That is Jos Plateau. You have Kaduna. You have Kano, as he alluded to, and Maiduguri. That's going to take it to 14. The reason why that's important is because it has enabled us to go from 500 tests a day, as he alluded to, but now, in specific terms, we are now, by the end of this week, by Friday, we will be at a point where in Lagos we're doing 2,000 tests a day. 2,000 a day in Lagos alone. In Abuja, we'll be doing an additional 1,000 per day, right? So that's 3,000 daily between Lagos and Abuja, not to speak of some of the other states where we have established laboratories and are about to launch new ones. So that's very critical in terms of, eventually stamping out the further spread of the virus. Now, in terms of the isolation centers, a lot of conversation in the country about that, a lot of talk around Lagos, but it's important to note that the coalition of the private sector, they've put in place, we're just about to launch the 600-bed facility in Kano that was supported very generously by Alhaji Aliko Dangote. We have a 210-bed facility coming up in Port Harcourt as well. So Port Harcourt will not only have an isolation center, but also a molecular evaluation laboratory. Also in Enugu, you're going to have a 200-bed facility. In Maiduguri, you're going to have a 200-bed facility. So we're really spreading this around the country, and we're not waiting for the virus to spread for us to react. We're moving ahead of the curve, ahead of the virus, to prepare for that. Now, in terms of the question about how the lockdowns have worked and how how important it is for us to work in synergy, the federal government has worked assiduously to really work very closely across political affiliations to ensure that we have a very equitable distribution of these assets, whether it's equipments, whether it's materials in terms of PPE sets and all of that, and as well as, of course, the infrastructure that we've been referring to. Now, what we have seen is that, unfortunately, before President Muhammadu Buhari had issued the lockdown in terms of Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun State, some governors had already gone ahead to order lockdowns in a way that wasn't quite congruous with what the federal administration was doing. So now what we need to ensure, and we're working very hard on this in collaboration with the states, is how do we make sure that we do not in any way disrupt national supply chains? How do we make sure that we have a situation where vendors across sectors, whether it's manufacturing, agriculture, oil and gas, whatever the field is, that they can move seamlessly through certain interstate routes. And to that effect, we have been able to put in place a set of guidelines that will be mapped out by the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing that will ensure that there are designated interstate routes that our vendors and our supply chain stakeholders will be able to transport their goods through, so that we don't have the kind of economic disruption that's unnecessarily occasioned by incongruent issues logistically and operationally between the federal and state governments. Another thing that we're really adamant about is, as we make the interventions we're making, not just from the private sector, but even from government, with the new 500 billion naira crisis intervention fund, which I'm sure I'll get into as the program goes on, we're ensuring that we also put in some stipulations and conditions that if we are going to supply, which we're going to do, the states with funds that are coming from multilateral institutions like the World Bank, for example, we're also going to ensure that we put in conditions that are attached to verifiable monitoring mechanisms to ensure that those interventions in the health sector, expanding public health facilities, expanding facilities to drug manufacturers, etc., that those things are applied the way that they are intended to be applied. And so we're not going to have the kind of diversion that we've had historically in the country.
Okay. Let's go to Professor Nasifi. Prof, judging from the macro socioeconomic plans, COVID-19 has mounted intense pressure on the health sector in Nigeria. Assessing the national response and coordination by the Presidential Task Force, what are the implications so far on the economic perspective?
The implications are multi-dimensional and multifaceted. Remember, Nigerian economy is an economy existing within the Committee of Nations, and that we are living in an interconnected and a globalized world where happenings in other economies, especially our major trading partners, have either positive or negative transmissionary effects on our economy. Remember, before the lockdown, there was crisis between Saudi Arabia and Russia over the pricing and the production of oil that has led to the crash in the price of oil and The crisis in the global economy is compounded by the pandemic, leading to shutting down of production facilities in most notable economies, China, India, Europe, and America. And these are the major trading partners of Nigeria. And therefore, the macroeconomic consequences or negative macroeconomic implications of what is happening in those domestic economies, as I've said earlier, have negative transmission effects. If you look at the world globally, the US have provided over 2 trillion bailout funds. British have provided over 500 billion. China have provided over 380 billion. Nigeria has provided, in the first instance by the central bank, over 1.1 trillion. All these are done in order to reflect various economies and to make the economies move forward and to remain productive. But certainly, the disruptions occasioned by the global pandemic are likely to lead, or is likely to lead, to recession in major economies, and that recession may have negative effects on our economy, but our preparedness or our ability to prepare and take necessary preventive and insulative measures against that happening may not absolutely insulate our economy from the negative transmissionary effects of the global happenings, but may certainly lower the negative consequences within our domestic economy. But that is extremely dependent on multidimensional factors, the most important of which is the collaborative ability between the federal and the state governments in order to have a complete review of our macroeconomic indicators, our budget projections, our expenditure profile, particularly recurrent and capital expenditure components, our overhead components, and every actual cost component that is associated with running this economy, so that we can have a holistic review that is truly reflective of the contemporary economic realities and our ability to lower our exposure to the negative macroeconomic budgets that will arise or that are likely to arise from the global pandemic.
Thank you so much. From Ibadan, Professor Tomori, in the part one of assessing the national response, your advocacy was mobilizing Nigerians not to see the lockdown from a negative perspective, but from a sacrificial perspective in line with Mr. President's rallying point. Since the last outing and now, what's your assessment regarding the national response?
Thank you very much. It's been good listening to Dr. Soni and the SSA and the economists about the situation. Well, I think again, it varies from state to state what the performance has been. In some of the states, the compliance by the people has been quite good. In others, it has not been. And I think part of it is because I don't think we provided enough information to people. That compliance, that commitment, well, the president said, this is for all of us. Your action will determine what affects the nation completely. And what I've seen from the federal government's action now, first for us to say, let's commend the federal government for what they've done so far. It's unfortunate that it looks more like putting icing on the bad cake. And the bad cake I'm talking about is the health system of the country itself. That we need to address properly. And the situation where states were taking action before the federal government is also another area which has created quite a lot of problems. I think some of our colleagues alluded to the fact that there needs to be congruency between what the states are doing and what the federal government is doing. Part of it is because health being what it is, they say it's on the concurrent list. States have a right to act, if they think the federal government is not acting as fast as it should be. But I think now that we have a task force, now that we have the government taking the appropriate action that needs to be taken, then the states should comply with whatever the government is doing. Government and states should work together, and let's come up with what is universal for the country. As to the individual people or persons on the individual, I think we have to realize that this is now a national problem. It's not a federal government thing, it's not a state thing, it's not a political, whatever it is. It is the nation, the life of the nation at stake. Your contribution, my compliance, your compliance will make the difference. The country may sink on the fact that you did not comply with what the government is doing. So you are as important, as I said last time, as important as anybody in the government. Your role is as important, even more, if not more important, than what the government is doing. So to the average Nigerian, let us go ahead and comply with what the government is saying. It is our life. It is for our safety.
Thank you. Doctor, listening to the Presidential Task Force, but before then, if you are just joining us, it's Tuesday Live, and we are taking a look at assessing the national response on COVID-19, part 2 of it. Along the program, we shall be taking reports across the country and also a vox pop. Listening to the Presidential Task Force daily briefings, one of the big news yesterday was the UN Nigeria Basket Fund. But just clear the air, there have been a lot of misunderstanding, misgivings around the Chinese team arriving in Nigeria. What is the update, and why should people be expressing fear at this time?
So, thank you. I would rather not be drawn into this, but I hope I'll be able to explain clearly the thinking of the Presidential Task Force. And first of all, before I do that, I just want to re-emphasize that the PTF will never take a decision that would harm our citizens. We will never take a decision that will be against the best interest of our country. When we started interfacing with the Chinese company CCECC, what they offered was they will bring in medical equipment, including equipment that will enable us install isolation facilities that will function, and intensive care. Along the way, part of the discussion had to do with the need for technical support. Technical support to enable those ventilators that will be installed to work well. Technical support to enable the infection control systems that will be set up to work and function well. The Chinese have the best experience when it comes to infection control in terms of preventing transmission, especially in hospital settings. The last thing we want is for this epidemic to wipe out our medical and nursing, our frontline healthcare workers. And you can see what's happening in Italy. The Chinese that will be coming in will be helping us to make sure that the equipment that are brought in are functional, that the settings in terms of the isolation facilities are consistent with what they did. Remember, yesterday there was something in the news, I'm not sure whether you've heard of it, but the province within Wuhan where this thing started had 0 new infections, 0 new infections. And that was where it all started. So that's what they will be helping us with. We will not agree, and neither will we sign to any attempt for Chinese doctors to come into the country to treat or to even advise on treatment, because it will be against the law. They are not licensed by the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria. Therefore, a government will not tolerate that sort of approach at all. And I think it's unfortunate that there was this misunderstanding in the first place. We will make sure that when they come in, because as far as I'm concerned, there are 2 concerns. There are the public have 2 issues with this, from my own understanding. One is that the Chinese have, that's where coronavirus all started, and therefore if we bring in Chinese, we will be reintroducing infection into the country. Well, against that, I can tell you that China is no longer the epicenter. China had 82,000 cases. Italy at the moment has 135,000. The US has 400,000. So you should actually be more worried about people coming from Europe or North America than from China. That's one. Secondly, these people that will come to provide us with technical support will be quarantined for 14 days. They will not have contact with our people for 14 days. They will be monitored by the port health authorities, and it's only at the end of day 14 that they will be allowed to come out and assist in whatever they needed to do from the functional side, but not treatment, because I'm a doctor as well. I know what it entails, allowing people from different health systems to work in a system that may be completely different. So that's one of the concerns that the public have, infection issues, and we have addressed that. And in any case, even the crew that will be coming from China, they are Nigerian. We will subject them to the same protocol, and we will quarantine them for the same 14 days. So that's one. The second issue that I believe people are worried about is the treatment side. And I've already said, these people will not even advise on the management of a patient with coronavirus, because the management, we have very good doctors in this country. We have excellent doctors when it comes to intensive care. The management, infectious diseases, it's pretty straightforward, I'm afraid. And we will be reaching out as well to the Nigeria Infection Control Association, so that when they come in, they will be able to relate to the NICA, whom I know quite well, and they will be able to train our people on the best method to make sure that they do not pick up coronavirus infection. That's all it is about. Okay, so I hope I've resolved this, but of course, as I said, I would rather not be drawn in, but I hope my explanation makes sense.
Okay. If you're just joining us, we are taking a look at an assessment of the national response on coronavirus part 2. A lot of deployments are in place, and if you want to be part of this discussion, our phone lines will be displayed on the screen. Make your call, in doing this, turn down the volume of your television set. Otherwise, you can also be part of the conversation through our Twitter handle, Tuesday Live NTA. Well, like I said, deployments are on ground, a lot of persons are involved. What are the palliatives in place? Let's take a listen to this report, and after that, we'll sustain the conversation. Stay with us.
Coronavirus, a word not new to anyone, but what is new to nations is the unprecedented disruptions the pandemic has caused globally, from setbacks in global stock and financial markets to a sharp drop in crude oil prices that affects countries like Nigeria. The journey could seem gloomy.
The whole instruments of government are now mobilized to confront what has now become both a health emergency and an economic crisis.
Taking into cognizance these realities, the federal government has come up with palliative measures as part of its strategic plans to reduce the effect posed by the coronavirus pandemic. If we recall, the Central Bank of Nigeria announced its 6th initial policy response targeted at providing support for affected households, businesses, and other financial bodies to cushion the adverse economic impact of the pandemic. They are the extension of moratorium of 1 year on all principal repayments, interest rate reduction on all applicable CBN intervention facilities from 9 to 5% per annum, creation of 50 billion naira targeted credit facility through Nisal Microfinance Bank for households and small and medium-sized enterprises. There is also credit support for healthcare industry to meet potential increase in demand for healthcare services and products. Regulatory forbearance granted to all deposit money banks leave for consideration of temporary and time-limited restructuring of the tenor, in addition to loan terms for businesses and households affected by the COVID-19. Lastly, strengthening of the CBN LDR policy with additional incentives to encourage extension of longer-tenured credit facilities. The CBN's response initiative was just a starter pack of the federal government's palliative measures. The drop in global crude oil prices prompted the reduction in the price of petrol from 145 naira to 125 naira and 123 naira, respectively, by the federal government.
Everybody is happy. At least there's a relief now in the land.
It's a good development. 20 naira difference is a big difference.
Don't get it twisted, it's not a wedding ceremony. These are some of the beneficiaries testifying to the 20,000 naira cash received under the conditional cash transfer of the Social Investment Program initiated by the federal government, with an advance payment of 2 months, which is part of palliative measures taken to reduce discomfort for the poor and vulnerable across the country. And as expected, the money came in handy.
And we use it to buy foodstuffs and medicine.
In my life, I have never held 20,000 naira.
Money was not the only token to be received as part of palliative measures. The distribution of 70,000 metric tons of food items has also been released by the federal government to be distributed to affected states under the lockdown.
We intend to move Ogari into Lagos and Ogun State. Maize, NEMA will determine when it is going to move moved.
25% of the population of the state, those are the ones that we are going to reach out to. And these are mostly the vulnerable in the states.
No doubt, some of these measures taken will attract more funding. So pledges from corporate bodies, banks and good-spirited individuals who have already decided to key into the coalition with a view to support the fight against COVID-19. But as the fight to end this pandemic continues, it is hoped that some of these palliative measures will pave way for a healthy livelihood in the midst of the storm.
Thank you, Ruth Agwele. Ajuri, the palliatives in place, it will pave way to enhance the living standards of Nigeria, but it looks as though there are some misconstrued directions in this. What's the update?
Well, I think one of the challenges that we have indeed had is the issue of misinformation and making sure that we very quickly and transparently battle misinformation with legitimate and correct information. Look, the palliatives are many. So I'm going to start from just very recently, President Muhammadu Buhari directed the Nigerian Customs Service to release approximately 46,000 tons of seized rice, about 36,000 kegs of vegetable oil, and approximately 136,000 cartons of tomato paste, just for example. These are seized items that are now going through the processing, through the scrutinization process of NAFDAC before they're released to the most vulnerable communities, particularly with an emphasis around the lockdown zones of Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun State. But of course, they will find themselves moving around the country in the form of the relief packages that we've talked about. In addition to that, the President has directed the release of 70,000 tons of grains that will be distributed to frontline COVID-19 affected states. That's an extremely important component of this, because we know that where there are outside of the presidential authorized lockdown zones, some states have taken such action. So we have to also make sure that we cater for the vulnerable segments of the population that are surrounding those states that are affected by COVID-19. So that will go there. Then, of course, in addition to that, the President has directed for all internally displaced persons in the country to receive 2 months worth of food rations in advance to make sure that there is absolutely no shortfall in some of the far-flung, very vulnerable areas around the country where this vulnerable demographic may be resident. In addition to all of that, you have very recently announced by the Minister of Finance and Budget and National Planning the 500 billion naira COVID-19 Crisis Intervention Fund. That fund is extremely important because it has multiple aspects to it that are going to go a long way to ameliorate the challenges confronting our people. First of all, you're going to have a facility of approximately 60, it's going to be actually not a facility, rather a payment of about 60 billion naira that's going to be used through, to technologically advance funds to those young Nigerians who are going to take part in one of the President's really core priority items in this season, which is the Special Public Works program that he's put in place. That is going to see the recruitment of 1,000 young Nigerians in every local government of the Federation. So you're going to have 774,000 young Nigerians working on things like urban and rural sanitation, working on social housing construction, working on agricultural extension services, working on even healthcare extension services, in addition to tree planting as well, and all of that. That is going to be very, very important. That's going to run from approximately beginning in December. You're going to see that mass mobilization. Some people may say, oh, tree planting, what does that have to do with anything? I think it's extremely important just to take a moment to understand that when we talk about tree planting, we need to, as an oil and gas producing country, we need to really enhance our carbon sink. We have to ensure that as we're diversifying into an agroeconomy, amongst others, that we are taking seriously the need to fight desertification, and we fight that with reforestation. How that plays into what we're talking about is when you're planting trees around the country, which we're going to mobilize our youths to plant 25 million trees around the country. That's the president's directive. That is going to ensure that you have the trees that fight erosion, that recycle the nutrients that are critical to be recycled into the soil for enhanced agricultural productivity, and also the national security implication of fighting desertification, because we know that it is directly resulting in a situation where during the dry seasons you have, of course, the herders migrating south, and we all know what that has resulted in over the past several years. So for us, that's a key priority in addition to the infrastructural development. So that is the 500 billion naira fund, the special works component. Now, I have to mention that some states, let me just say a state government has come out to suggest that somehow the federal government is politicizing the interventions in response to COVID-19. I want to make very clear on this program that the interventions in terms of cash, because you know we're doing it in terms of material, in terms of equipment, in terms of infrastructure, but in terms of cash interventions, we have within this facility...
We'll come to other perspectives. Let me just hold you there so that we don't exhaust you. You have gone deep.
May I finish that point?
Finish that. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah,
we have a fund within the 500 billion that is going to be dedicated to other states, cash interventions where required as situations are developing, in addition to all of the interventions we're already making around the country.
Okay. Professor Nasifi, given the palliatives on ground, we have cases where people will say it didn't get to them, even when it gets to them, it's not adequate. And listening to the Minister of Agriculture talk about what will be done, we'll go to the M&E. What could be the best strategy to also monitor, as much as this is going around the country, how best can we monitor to ensure that it gets to those who should get it?
Well, in reality, I have said it severally. I'm saying it now, and I will continue to say it. There's simply no any intervention you can undertake successfully in this country, in a federating country like Nigeria, in the absence of cooperative consultation with the state and local governments. For several years, we have had the issue of national identity system. If we have had a very good and workable national identity system, it could have been much easier to know exactly who are the potential beneficiaries and vulnerable people among our population, and to be able to provide e-based targeted assistance without much rancor of what we are seeing today. But be that as it may, the situation has now provided us with a very important opportunity to sit down clearly, work in consultation with the state governments, and come up with a robust national identification system that can be able to trace every single Nigerian where he is. Because the reality is that the federal government does not have land, neither does it have people. The people reside in the states and local governments. And let me be able to give you a typical example of why the crisis we are in is really monumental. And I stand to be corrected. There is no single state in Nigeria today that the state governor can tell you exactly who are in what profession, how much is their number. No chairman of a local government can tell you what are the number of people in his local government, what is their profession, and how can he easily identify them. Now, in the absence of a national coordinated identification system, providing palliatives using ad hoc measures certainly will be plagued with problems. So now is an opportunity for us to sit down and do what is right. Secondly, the palliatives that the federal government is trying to give in terms of engaging 1,000 people per local government, I really fault that approach for two reasons. Number one, if actually we want to make people really engaged, we have multi-dimensional problem in terms of infrastructure provision, particularly housing deficit in this country. And studies have indicated that there is no single aspect of infrastructure that actually employ as many people as possible like housing delivery. Now, the fact that we have so much deficit and the fact that if we want to undertake social housing will require millions and millions of people and specialized technical and vocational skills that we don't have, why don't we use this opportunity, collaborate with the state and local governments, and make sure that we train as much vocational and technical manpower, and then collaborate with the some state governments, put up a strategy for delivering social housing so that it will serve as one of the reflationary packages for the economy, but that can provide partially long-term engagement for those people that will be trained in vocational and technical skills, and that they can even become meaningfully employed beyond the periodic delivery of those social housing programs. Let me state emphatically, when the crisis in Syria started, the German government opens its borders to 1 million Syrians. Angela Merkel did not do that simply because she loved Syrians, but they realized that Hafiz al-Assad, the father of the president of Syria, and Gamal Abdel Nasser in the early 50s and 60s, realizing that they are in the Middle East and their countries do not have oil, what they did is that they make sure that they engage in massive vocational and technical skill of their citizens, to the extent that if you go to Egypt today, if you go to Syria today, you'll see a housewife. She may appear to be a housewife, but she's a plumber, she's an electrician, she's a welder. And that is why when 1 million Syrians enter Germany, you don't see them on the street. They went and filled the gap that is existing in Germany in terms of vocational and technical skills. Now, in our country, every year we produce over 1 million secondary school leavers. The adopted capacity of our educational system is extremely low, but we have refused to develop vocational and technical education to the extent that it becomes secondary or first attraction to secondary school leavers and index it to a living wage, so that you have a classification system just like what is happening in Scandinavia and Europe. Averagely, in most European countries and Scandinavia, and even in the United States of America, the graduation rate from secondary school to university is less than 50%. Why? Because young people have alternative attraction.
Prof, if you can hear me, so that we don't go off track, within the ambit of COVID-19, I just asked, what do you think would have been put in place to monitor and ensure that this gets to those who should get it, the palliatives?
It is important for us to have a monitoring and evaluation framework, but that monitoring and evaluation framework, as I said earlier, does not exist in a vacuum. You have to have a programmed action for you to monitor. If you don't have a programmed action, you monitor what? So, but in the absence of that, you cannot stop the palliatives. So all that is needed is for the federal government and the relevant ministries and agencies of the federal government to work with the relevant state governments to identify potential beneficiaries that are most vulnerable, document them appropriately, and then put in place a mechanism, particularly through the banking system, to make sure that actually those that are supposed to be the intended beneficiaries are actually the beneficiaries. And let me give you an example. Instantaneously, the banking system can adopt a system of identification without a paper. It has happened in India. It has happened in other countries. All you need to do is to put equipment to make sure that you have fingerprints of every potential beneficiary and his cornea. And then through that banking system, you can be able to deliver every palliative. And with that technological base, you can be able to ensure that the actual beneficiaries are the ones who are actual recipients of that assistance.
Okay, now to Ibadan, Professor Tomori, let me ask you what I'll call a double-barrel question. Quoting the UN Secretary General, Guterres, he says, there is no way to deal with the global challenges than with global responses organized in a multilateral way. Now, back home, looking at the reaction of plans to bring in the Chinese experts and how the enemy took it, and also the facilities that are being put in place, what kind of plan should be in place so that these facilities become very, very useful after now, and not to put the facilities and at the end of all this, they remain idle?
Thank you very much. I've been quite enthused by the response from my colleagues, but I'm really much happy to hear the Professor of Economics bringing things down to the reality. You know, when I started, I said we're putting icing on a bad cake, and that's exactly what he's telling us. The foundation, the base is the problem. Now, it was good listening to Dr. Aliu explaining those information about what the Chinese and people are doing. We need information in this country. That information should have been provided long before the announcement came that the Chinese were coming. You don't take the people of this country for granted. Give them the information that they require. And they are very sensible people, and they will listen to what you're saying. But if you don't give the information, of course, people will interpret it as, in what direction they are. So thank you, Dr. Aliu, for bringing up this information. People now begin to understand. But without that explanation, which should have been given a long time ago, of course, you expect the reaction that we're getting. Now, the economist has said it all. You know, you don't bring all these flood of interventions, you know, on a foundation that is not there. And that's going to happen. The question in the minds of people is, would this be only for COVID? Will COVID-19 will go? It shouldn't go. Like Ebola came and went. What do we do with the funds that we have with Ebola? Well, are we going to do the same thing with what we're doing with COVID-19? These are questions that you need to tell our people so that they understand that this is not going to be like what it was before. Nigerians must be made to understand that this is an opportunity, like the economist has said, to look back on what we've done in the past. How did we do it wrong? And why don't we believe our government? Because they've always lied to us. And as long as they continue to lie, people will not believe what they're saying. Time comes for transparency on the side of our government. Tell the truth as it is. Look at the information, what you showed about the palliatives. All the things that the NTA showed was people jumping up and happy. Is it that everybody is happy? There are other people who are also angry with what is going on. Why don't you show that? So that we have a balance of information. So that people know exactly what, and the government itself will not be deceived by what they are seeing on the NTA. So let's give the balanced information to the people. Now to what we are saying, the UN is coming with basket and all that. For example, I mean, there's nothing bad with that. This is a multilateral thing. We can't do it alone. We need the assistance of other countries. But we as a country must be, what do we do with the basket that comes with the multilateral funding? Is it going to be a leaking basket? We don't know what the money goes into. These are questions that the government must continue to assure us about what they are doing, and that is not going to be like before. We've lived 60 years of our independence, isn't it? See where we are. And maybe I can say that for my generation, things are a bit different. I've seen this country being a fantastic country. I've seen it going down the drain. You know, so these are issues that, are we going to have the same thing that we have? Can we go back and take this opportunity, as people have said, to look back at all the things we've done before? And can we change our attitude? Can we do things differently? Can we come out and do things the way that, you know, people will have confidence in this government?
Watch. We'll take a break, but before the break, a couple of tweets have come in, and I'll urge my guests across board to listen so I could address them when we come back from break. The first is directed at Dr. Aliyu. Femi Odunisi says, Dr. Aliyu, why is it possible to be reinfected by COVID-19 when the body must have built immunity against it? The next one by Ogbodo Destiny. Thanks for this opportunity. Please let the government take lead and put the citizens first in every of their discussion. Every Chinese are working for the interest of their government. Everyone is important. Obafemi Sheyi says, Nigeria has demonstrated versatility in curbing the spread of the pandemic, a move all Nigerians must appreciate. However, my question is, what are we, as NCDC, doing in the area of developing a vaccine within our local purview to stop the virus? Mansanawa says, to tackle the pandemic is overwhelming, but the distribution of palliative is so poor. Government needs to redirect ways in reaching out to those vulnerable. I think I should allow you to react from the last tweet quickly,
well, sure.
Before I take a break.
Okay. Well, I think the key issue here is that in all of there's no doubt about the fact that when you are handing out, giving out, administering palliatives on the scale that the federal government is, it has to be phased, right? You're not going to be able to hit every corner of the country on one day. It's a process, and we understand that there are those of our citizens who are concerned that indeed it has not yet hit their side yet. We understand those concerns, but what we are affirming to our people is that if you be patient with us, continue to hold us accountable, ask the right questions, we will get to you. We are going to get everywhere with the measures that we said we are going to get everywhere with. And I want to be very precise about something. Just today, it was announced by the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development that the continuation of the homegrown school feeding program is getting ready to commence. We are working very effectively with state governments around the country. What it's going to entail, because many people have asked the question, many Nigerians have asked, how are you going to continue feeding 8.5 million school children when schools are closed, right? And what we're going to do is we've put in place already a door-to-door voucher distribution scheme. What that's going to entail is we're going to go to the households that are already benefiting from the program all across the country, because it's in all participating states, I believe all states. And so what that's going to entail is on the voucher, you're going to have a collection time. So there's going to be a designated distribution site in all of the localities all around the country, and they're going to come at a certain time to avoid overcrowding and to ensure that we maintain social distancing, we maintain the protocols that are necessary to further stamp out COVID-19. So all of that has been put in place. That's also going to consist of ensuring that we maintain the employment, if you will, or the patronage of aggregators, those who are, producing things like beef, rice, tomato, and all of that across the value chain, over 100,000 cooks. All of them are going to be continually engaged through this process. So that's all around the country. Our people should be expectant. That's just one out of many, and I hope I'll get time to really elaborate on many of the other things that we're bringing forward.
Sure. When we return after the break, we'll allow Dr. Aliyu to respond to some of the key tweets, just like the Senior Special Assistant to the President of Public Affairs has done. Don't go away.
For now, the best and most efficient way to avoid getting infected is through regular hygienic and sanitary practices, as well as social distancing. As individuals, we remain the greatest weapon to fight this pandemic. By washing our hands regularly with clean water and soap, disinfecting frequently used surfaces and areas, coughing into a tissue or elbow, and strictly adhering to infection prevention control measures in health facilities, we can contain this virus.
to avoid this pandemic. Wash your hands regularly or sanitize your hands. Keep social and physical distancing. Avoid crowded places. Stay at home unless absolutely necessary. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth if your hands are not clean. Avoid the spread of coronavirus. Coronavirus is real.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
And tonight we are doing an assessment of the national response on COVID-2 Part 2. Before we went on break, a couple of tweets came in and I read them out. The SSC president has reacted to some. Now, let me allow Dr. Aliu to react to some. Doctor?
Thank you, Omini. So I believe the first question had to do with the issue of immunity against COVID. So far, even though the jury is out, but there's very strong evidence that if you are exposed to the coronavirus, the SARS, we call it the SARS-CoV-2, you're very likely to develop immunity because the antibodies that are produced are quite robust. But we don't know how long that immunity will last. We do have evidence from a related coronavirus. If you remember the SARS epidemic, the SARS coronavirus that we had back in 2002, 2003, and this was in China mostly. People developed immunity then. That immunity has lasted till now. So there have been people who have pretty good antibodies against SARS for 17, 18 years. So we feel that it's very likely the same situation would happen with this coronavirus because they are very similar. If you look at their surface proteins, particularly the spike proteins, they are very similar. The difference is really very small between them. So once you have coronavirus, COVID infection, it's very likely you will develop immunity. Unless the virus mutates in such a way that it's able to evade the antibodies that you've produced. With the issue of vaccine, we're still very far off from vaccine development. I think we're at least a year or more. We have what we call passive immunization, where antibodies are given. So people who have had the infection, you take their serum and you test for various infections, and then you use the antibodies that they have to then inject into those that have the infection. It's called passive immunization. There are studies that are now going on looking at that, but I think a vaccine is very far off. It's not going to be now, probably at least a year or two, although Professor Tomori will probably be in a better position to explain this.
Okay, we'll get to him. Now quickly, our first caller tonight is Bello. Bello is calling in from Gombe. Hello, Bello. Hello, Bello. We lost that call. But quickly, before we take a break, Doctor, the next report. What is it about this we are here? Because so much information is hitting everybody through social media, traditional media. What is all this about hydrochloroquine for the cure of COVID-19? What is it all? Is it true?
So first of all, let me start by saying that so far the WHO has not recommended any specific treatment, whether it's hydroxychloroquine or the HIV drug Kaletra or the remdesivir or any of the monoclonal antibodies. There's a trial that's just about to start or has just started called the Solidarity Trial. This is being monitored by WHO. It's a multi-center trial. It's pretty huge, and it's very likely it will give us a specific answer because it's randomizing people to chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, the HIV drug, and I think interferon 2 beta. That will give us the answer. Having said this, it's really important that people do not deviate from standard practice. The reason why, I've said this so many times before, the reason why if you have a headache, if you buy paracetamol, you'll be very confident that that paracetamol will work is because it's gone through a very rigorous process of trials. The risk of people taking chloroquine or all sorts of things is, first of all, they could harm themselves. They could actually make things worse. Secondly, there are drugs that are really essential drugs that we need. Those drugs will become scarce if you start using them against coronavirus.
Well, our first caller, Bello, is back online. Hello, Bello. Hello, Bello.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Bello, please, could you turn down the volume of the television set, please?
Good evening, I'm speaking from Gombe.
Okay, we can hear you, but turn down the volume of the television, please.
I'm speaking from Gombe.
Go ahead. Can you turn down the volume of your television set?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Go ahead.
Good evening. Hello,
Go ahead. It seems that call is not making any headway. Well, our next report is coming in from Owerri.
Following the outbreak of COVID-19 in Wuhan, China, and its subsequent spread to other parts of the world, including Nigeria, the federal government responded swiftly to check further spread of the killer disease in the country by putting in place preventive measures, including shutting down of the nation's land, sea, and air borders, among others. Assessing the situation on ground with regards to palliative measures, a cross-section of Imo citizens lauded the measures put in place by the federal and various state governments towards checking the spread of coronavirus.
I think the federal government of Nigeria has done very well. They have done very well, and that is clearly evident from the low rate we have had in Nigeria relative to our population, relative to our industrial activity, our connection with outside country.
The only way you can avoid contact is total lockdown. You know, some people may want to frown at it, but that's the right thing, and government has a responsibility, and that of protecting us, first of all, is the number one responsibility that they have.
As part of efforts to cushion the effects of the total lockdown imposed by the Imo State government against the spread of COVID-19, the Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Declan Emenumba, says
there are quite a number of them. The government is distributing food items and food condiments to the people through the local governments and the traditional rulers and town union presidents.
The Information Commissioner further stated that despite the straight case in the state, which resulted into the lockdown of some workers of a hotel in Umuguma area of Imo State, who were alleged to have had contact with a suspected COVID-19 infected person, the state is yet to record any confirmed case of COVID-19, as the affected workers have all been released after testing negative.
Our next stop tonight is Kaduna.
What started as a partial lockdown in Kaduna State assumed the status of 24-hour curfew due to gross non-compliance by a majority of the populace. Although concerted efforts have been made to enforce the curfew with appreciable successes recorded, much is still left to be desired as more reports of non-compliance continue to feature. In some instances, full-blown market transaction. These developments are fully noted by the government and decisive measures are on the table.
We have reviewed the situation with security agencies to ramp up enforcement of the restriction of movement in the interest of the safety of everyone. My good people of Kaduna State, the quarantine order continues to be enforced, and this time around, anyone who runs afoul of the law will be dealt with irrespective of his or her status.
While the government insists on the lockdown, it also takes notice of major motivation prompting people out, the search for food. Assorted foodstuff had been stocked by the government and disbursed across the local government areas with a view to cushioning the effect of the sit-at-home order, especially for the less privileged.
Well, actually, the government of Kaduna State has earmarked 500 million
to buy foodstuff for the vulnerable group, most especially at this time where we have this issue of COVID-19 and people are expected to stay at home.
We are here to give our donation to the Kaduna State government for this epidemic, pandemic, COVID-19.
In addition, the government has given a grace of Tuesday and Wednesday every week for people to restock on food and other essentials.
Thanks for staying tuned, and if you're just joining us, we are discussing assessing national response on COVID-19 Part 2. Before I go to Professor Dalma, he raised key fundamental issues which I want the jury to respond to: the issue of data capture, data inaccuracy, state and local government involvement, housing infrastructure, and vocational training.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
First of all, I think it's very important at a time like this, when all of us are together in a boat that is rocking, that we don't, yield to cynicism. There's a fine line between making sure that, yes, we do need to ask the right questions, we need to ask tough questions, we need to get to the root of issues, but we shouldn't do it in a way that suggests that somehow what we're doing now is not enough. And I want to be very specific about what I'm talking about. The Special Public Works Program is a core pillar of what it is. And I've already mentioned tree planting, sanitation, and all of the road rehabilitation, all these other things. A core pillar is social housing. To mobilize young people in all the local governments of the nation to be able to put their hands. It's a labor-intensive program. It's not a freebie or a free lunch. This is you're receiving funds to do a job, and it's a hard job that you'll be doing every day to make that contribution to national development. So social housing has already been envisaged. On the issue of technical and vocational education, which was mentioned, there is not a shortfall right now in vocational institutes. We have construction technology faculties, we have various institutes where trade schools, private and public, we have all of those things. One of the biggest challenges we do have, however, is orientation, right? In the average Nigerian home, around the country, across state borders, what you have is this notion that if you're not a doctor, if you're not a lawyer, if you're not an accountant, if you're not a scientist, if you're not one of these, or a businessman, or whatever the case may be, that you're not quite hitting it, right? You're not quite doing what you should be doing. There's this notion that these white-collar, focused academic pursuits should be prioritized far and higher and above, some of the blue-collar pursuits. That is an orientation issue. In the United States, for example, one of the major economic revolutions that has, internally, that has happened over the last 10, 15 years is the federal government there has really said, look, we need to deprioritize in many ways the social sciences and psychology, sociology. Those things are good. It's good that we have sociologists and all that. But we need to get into the blue collar, because blue collar workers globally are on an average are earning more than liberal arts and sciences graduates, because plumbers and carpenters in industrialized economies are making a lot of money. So there's a reorientation component to it, and we're active on that. And I want to be clear about what we've already done. If you look at even within the social investment scheme, what were we doing with Empower? We weren't just giving people money to sit at home. We brought young people out, young graduates out, to teach them vocational skills. People were learning how to fix cars. People were learning how to construct housing. People were learning how to work on power lines. So all of that is to say that we, I'm sorry, Omini, all of that is to say that we have prioritized it. We have set up innovation hubs under the NSIO across geopolitical zones. All of that is going towards what we're talking about. So we're not saying what we have not already been working on very assiduously.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, I was trying to interject you. We have a caller from Yenagua, David West. Hello, David West. Hello, David West.
Yes, thank you very much for having me in your discussion this very good evening. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, please. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
Now, you see, what I want to say is that let me start with the palliative measures. For me, I think the palliative measures issue I want to tell my good friend Ingelali there that we need proper information, proper sensitization, everyday update on how these things are being distributed to the people and how it has gotten to the people. When you don't give people proper updates, they will have to misconstrue or misconcept this thing and give people wrong information out there. But when you give people everyday update that look, in so state, so persons have benefited, these have gone to so local government, and this is how it is being done, the people will begin to follow you up. Then another issue here again is, for me, our takeaway, and I want to say this to the government, as a matter of urgency, the people that are in charge with this national identity management, this is the time for them to begin to roll out these national identities to people. It is not proper when you go and make a registration. It takes like 2-3 years before you get the national identity card itself. And we're talking of data here. If we have a comprehensive data, we will not be in this quagmire. Look at Cross River State. I was watching Cross River State. They were able to get a data for themselves to see how they can distribute these palliative measures to their citizens there, the people of Cross River State. The data might not be 100% accurate, but they have done something. So I expect the federal government to go there, ask them, how are you able to get these vulnerable people's data you are using today? Also give us this your data so that we can work with it via our own palliative from the federal government, so that you include this your data, you can distribute it to the people of Cross River State, and will now begin to get good information. Then finally, all these things we are talking here now is for people to know that COVID-19 is real. Why am I saying this? We need more enlightenment. If you look at the position of, with all due respect, to a clergyman, a very respected, man of God, like Pastor Chris Ohakilomi, who had come up with a proposition that the coronavirus issue is just for the federal government or people to lay 5G network, whatever, cable line. For him, a man of God they respect so much, and he has a lot of followers who believe in his word. So if they go by that belief that there's something like COVID-19, it's just a gimmick to lay under what do you call it? Wires, 5G wires. And people go by that notion. It's a problem to us. So we need more sensitization for people to know that this thing is real. Just obey all instructions given to you by the appropriate authorities. Stay at home. It's just for a moment, for our own sake, please. And the security agencies do not need to force you. It is not in every case you must whip you with force. It's a matter of civility.
Thank you, David West. Before I take on Professor Nafisi, David West has raised a very fundamental issue. 5G. It's been raging. So can we respond to that?
Well, first of all, it's just demonstrably false, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is we have not in any way began the process of a 5G rollout in Nigeria. If that theory were true, I mean, some of this stuff is common sense. I mean, if that theory were true, you go to some of the developing countries that are facing coronavirus, for example, why would they be facing the coronavirus as a result of 5G if those countries have never, they're not even at 4G, not to speak of 5G, some of these places that are being affected by coronavirus. So that's just demonstrably false. But I do think that our brother did mention a very important issue, which is the need for us to be very active about getting the correct information. It's one thing to give out correct information on a daily basis, even on an hourly basis. We're seeing it from the NCDC. They're constantly updating verifiable data and figures for our people to see, and so that they're equipped to most effectively collaborate with government. But beyond that, there's also a responsibility on the part of the consumers of information to do their part in making sure that they go to those sources that are verifiable, those sources that are authentic, so that we don't end up inadvertently or, in some cases, intentionally spreading misinformation towards any kind of narrow end. So that's a major challenge that we face. And, he also mentioned the issue of palliatives. One of the major kind of hot button topics in recent days, has been a situation where a state governor has said that why is it that Lagos is getting 10 billion naira and, we haven't received a dime and all of that. It's extremely important that there's context. The Lagos state government had already spent approximately 6 billion naira on responding to the COVID-19 crisis in Lagos State in terms of infrastructure, materials, supplies, palliatives, all of that. Before the federal government stepped in and said, look, let's have the list of what it is that you spent 6 billion naira on. They accounted for every kobo that they had spent the money on. Before, they were now refunded with a little bit of excess so that they can deal with the expanding crisis which they are now effectively dealing with. So I want our people to know that let's verify information, let's continue to ask the right questions, but also let's make sure that we all understand that this crisis is a pan-national crisis, and the funds that are being set aside within the 500 billion naira crisis intervention fund, for example, is a pan-national fund for intervention in all states of the Federation, not just those with COVID-19 cases or just those that have been locked down with the direct authorization of Mr. President.
Okay. Now, going to Professor Nafisi, IMF, that the International Monetary Fund, has said that in reassessing all this, it has done some reassessment of 2020 to 2021 and feels that there will be a recession, comparing it to that it may be worse than that of 2019. Looking at the scale of coordination and the magnitude of national response in Nigeria, what do you make of IMF's reassessment?
You see, the reassessment of IMF is a true reality of the situation because they did that assessment on the basis of verifiable data and very sophisticated models and information across the globe for them to have reached that conclusion. Now, the most important thing for us in Nigeria is to be able to look deeply, carefully, and see what can we do differently. What can we do in terms of lowering our benchmarks, which we have started in terms of the oil pricing and reducing the component of the budget, especially the capital expenditure component. And importantly, as we go forward, the economy or the world economy, as predicted by IMF, is likely to go into recession. So 3 or 4 fundamental issues, we need to undertake them in order not to absolutely insulate ourselves from that crisis, but to see in what way can we minimize the impact and therefore minimize the impact of the potential or possible recession that is likely to come in the future. Number one is the issue of optimization of resources. You and me and everybody in Nigeria knows that the way we are spending public resources, there is no clear optimization. So the federal and the state governors and Mr. President, we need to sit down and look at how we can reduce clearly overheads, how we can lower the cost of delivering capital projects in Nigeria, and in what way can we especially reduce the over-bloated salaries and allowances of political office holders by the quantum or magnitude of the possible reduction in our income. That is one. Number two, we need to replete the economy. And in the process of repleting an economy in the face of recession and in the face of declining revenues, there is no one hard way that fits all solutions. So I think it is an opportunity now to convene economic management stakeholders from across this country to sit down and articulate a sustainable and coordinated economic development framework that will go a long way in insulating our economy in collaboration with the state, local governments, and federal government and the private sector. Number three is the issue of developing or creating employment opportunities in the face of impending recession. Mind you, the statistics from the National Bureau of Statistics indicated that we have over 23% unemployment rate. And with a population of 200 million, we are talking about 46 million people. One sectoral intervention cannot be able to give us the tens of millions of employment that we require. So it is now also an opportunity, particularly through the instrumentality of the National Economic Council, for now Mr. President and the Vice President and the state governors and the Economic Advisory Council to sit down clearly and see in what way can we consistently reflect the economy, but reflecting the economy in a way that will massively create employment opportunities. And this is an opportunity to go back to my earlier point of vocational and technical training. The reason why young people in Europe, in Scandinavia, in America find vocational training attractive is because there is a comprehensive grading system of every vocational activity, and every single grade is attached to an existing minimum wage. And therefore, it is possible for a plumber in UK, who is a grade A plumber, to earn a higher salary than a master's degree holder because there is a grading system. But you cannot grade vocational and technical skills at the federal level. You need the assistance of the states and local government for them to facilitate formation of trade and vocational cooperatives, register individuals in vocational skills as per local government, provide a coordinated framework for grading, and then come up with a law that will index the minimal payment for each of the different strata of vocational skills attached to the minimum wage. If you do that, believe me sincerely, a lot of young people that are craving to get degree, if he knows that if he's a grade A plumber, you call him to give him his service, you'll charge him a consultancy fee of a minimum of 1,000, 2,000 naira. Nobody will be looking for degrees that are worthless. That job cannot be there. So, but you see, the issue is this cannot be done by the federal government alone. I really salute the efforts of the federal government in terms of putting this economy in a proper perspective. But unfortunately, we are living in a federating country. There is a limit to how excellent the activities or intervention of the federal government will make the desired impact in the absence of cooperation, consultation, and collaboration with the other two tiers of government. This is an opportunity for us to put aside bipartisanship. This is an opportunity to put aside useless primordial differences. This is an opportunity to work as a team for Nigeria, for the betterment of Nigeria, and provide a very good foundation for sustainable and all-inclusive prosperity going into the future. We also need to look at one issue, which is very important, my fellow colleagues Nigerians. In Nigeria today, particularly with the elites, our consumption behavior is extremely foreign-oriented and dependent. We need to have a thinking, we need to have a discussion. How can we, as Nigerians, with all the multitude of talent that Allah has given us in this country, how can we look at every single item or product that is being used in Nigeria? How do we encourage its local production and consumption? What industrial policy do we need to put in place in order to promote local production? However draconian it may appear, we cannot continue as people to rely disproportionately on imported goods. That is why our economy becomes easily susceptible to shock whenever there is a crash in the international price of oil or there is a crash in the value of naira relative to dollars, because we have so much foreign dependency. But local production, local consumption, and reorientation are issues that we cannot discuss over the TV. We need to have a very frank discussion at the highest level in our political governance with Mr. President, the governors, the representatives of the private sector, so that let us put in place a policy to promote what is made in Nigeria, but importantly, for we the elites to lead the way by consuming what is made in Nigeria. And finally, is the issue of national development planning culture, which I have been persistently advocating, and I was happy in the last couple of months, the federal government has put in framework in order to develop a medium-term plan of 5 years and another long-term plan of 15, 20 years. But you see, much as the federal government is making this effort, what are the state government doing? What are the local governments doing? If we look at, for example, India, which I have given examples severally, for over 80 years, India has consistent national development plan of 5 years. And that is why when the Indians want to register people that are old and to provide palliatives, just like what we are trying to do, India came up with a policy as far back as 2011 to make sure that every Indian citizen that is 65 and above have access to social stipend payment. And what did India do? They didn't ask anybody for a national identification number. They just put a policy or a law that compel banks to open account for every citizen of India that is 65 years and above, provided he has his thumbprint and he has.
I'll come back to you, Prof.
And
going to Ibadan, Professor Tomori, I would love you to react to one of the tweets by Obafemi Sheyi, which says Nigeria has demonstrated versatility in curbing the spread of the pandemic, a move all Nigerians must appreciate. However, my question is, what is the NCDC doing in the area of developing a vaccine within our local purview to stop the virus? Dr. Liu addressed it briefly. Could you expand on that?
Very much. I'm glad you finally came to me, because virologists have a way of being relegated to the ground and will cause the most problems that you have. Anyway, let me look at the issue of vaccines. I think Dr. Liu has said it. We are a passive nation. We're a passive participant in the issue of vaccines. We consume the vaccines that are produced all over the world. We have no active part in it. But that was not the situation before. Somewhere in Yaba in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, this country was producing yellow fever vaccine. I remember in 1985, when we had an epidemic of yellow fever in this country, it was the vaccine from Yaba that we used in sorting our problem out. But then we allowed all those things to decay. And so where we are now, NCDC alone can't do anything about vaccine production in this country. Government has made efforts by joining what we call a joint venture agreement with a company that will be producing vaccines in this country. However, the problem with that is the fact that Nigeria has signed agreement with other people to buy vaccines over the next 20, 30 years. Now, how are you going to have your own company produce a vaccine when you're already committed to buy vaccines from foreigners for the next so long years? You remember the Gavi alliance that we did, that we had recently, when Gavi said we are ready to become free of them. And then we said, no, give us extra years. We want to continue be dependent on you. That's where some of the things I think we need to look beyond COVID 2019. Where have we gone wrong? How can we, the country that was producing vaccines before, what went wrong? Can we move on from there and learn from? A few of our colleagues in the economics have said a few things that we need to look at. Now, let me come back to some of the very various issues. I just quickly want to talk about that. But in short, to be a vaccine producer, you also need to be able to have facilities to do what we call clinical trials of your vaccines. Some, a few African countries have centers where you can do clinical trials. We don't have in Nigeria. Those are some of the basic things we need to address. The basic things, government putting funding into research, putting into those basic things that research doesn't often yield money immediately. But on the long run, you're going to find that, a lot of the money we're spending, depending on extra, that we could have put that on some of the things that we are now buying from outside. And the question in my mind is, where was all this money that we're now getting before? Where was all this money that's now coming up from all corners? And yet, we see that. And then that question is, let me also say one thing. In countries that have locked themselves down, they're still functioning. They're working from home. Can we work from home in Nigeria? Take our universities. We are totally closed and locked down. I have people overseas whom I know, lecturers who are giving lectures online to their students. Though the university is closed, universities are still working. ASU goes on striking about whatever. These are issues that we need government to get itself involved. So on the vaccines, let me just quickly summarize. Right now, we will continue to remain a passive participant in vaccine production and vaccine consumption as a country if we don't address the baseline of science and technology. Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, still on you, what can you tell us assessing the national coordination currently looking at tracking and reporting?
Was that for me?
It's for you, yes. Looking at national coordination of the response in terms of tracking and reporting.
Well, you know, yes, okay, I think the first place we need to start from is the issue of knowing who is positive. If you know it's positive, then you know who to track about. I think I remember the Minister of Health saying he wasn't sure whether we have reached the stage of community transmission because the data, EP data, is not that complete. We don't pay due attention to things in this country. The minutest details become very, very important. If a man, like some of the initial stories we are hearing, somebody came to Ibadan who was sick. Nobody tells me where was he in Ibadan, how long was he in Ibadan, which part of Ibadan was he, which hotel did he stay in. That information is not a federal information alone. It should be available to the people in Ibadan, the government and the people who take action. Then they know where to go. Abuja can't come and track in Ibadan. It has to be the people in Ibadan who are then provide them with all the information they require. And so that we need to pay a little more attention to make our tracking easier. If a person comes into this country, I mean, take the original case, went to, if not for the fact that he was a consultant for a foreign company, I can imagine if it had been in Nigeria like me, who works in Alaba market, he would have come into this country, I would have gone for training, treatment somewhere, and nobody will know. So we need that involvement, that detailed information to make our tracking easier. And one other point I think we need to stress. Now, because of shortage of kits and whatever, we are limiting the type of people that we can train. Now evidence is showing 20-30% of those who are not showing symptoms are actually positive for COVID, and some of them are transmitting. Now it's time for this country to move forward, to test anybody who has had contact with any case, whether he's showing symptoms or not, to be tested. It's only then we have the real information that we require. And not only that, just get the basic information of that person. You know, what age, where has he been, all those kind of information. That will help us in improving our tracking. We're doing a great job with tracking, but we can do a better job than we're doing right now.
Okay, we take a report from Ekiti. When we return, we sustain a conversation with Dr. Aliu, who will leave off in the course of the program.
The palliative materials, which are mainly foodstuffs like rice, beans, wheat, gari, as well as soup ingredients, are to be distributed to the vulnerable and the less privileged across the 16 local government areas of the state who have been affected by the lockdown order to curb the spread of COVID-19 in the state. Ekiti State Governor Dr. Kaudi Fayemi said the gesture is in recognition of the need to make life easier for the less privileged, while efforts will also be made to provide financial assistance to those whose daily income were affected.
The threat of coronavirus, COVID-19, is daunting, but with unity of purpose, we shall overcome it. These facts are not meant to be distributed for streets or wards to share. The targeted beneficiaries are the aged, less fortunate, and the physically challenged in our state.
Similarly, some political office holders at Ekiti also extended hands of support to the aged who are 60 years and above in the community as palliative at this lockdown period to fight the spread of the pandemic. Pharmacists in Ekiti State also donated packs of hand sanitizers and alcoholic spray produced by the body to the state government to assist in the campaign against the spread of the dreaded disease.
80% of the hand sanitizers you see in town, they are fake. They are afraid it's either the active ingredient, which is alcohol, is not enough, or they are bringing some materials that they use to make gel that will be injurious to hand and to the skin generally. So we are just showing the example.
Meanwhile, the Way of Ado Ekiti, Oba Rufus Adejugbe, has commended governments and groups for various palliative packages given to the vulnerable and the poor in some communities in the state, saying other ways to do indigence to assist in the spirit of good neighborliness.
Thanks for staying tuned. Quite fundamental, Doctor. The issue of the fact that the war put together has hit past 75,000 mark. Any cause for worry, particularly in Nigeria?
So I wouldn't want to alarm people. Certainly, I wouldn't say it's a time to panic. But if you look at the mortality rate, this is the number of people that have died when compared to those that have had the infection. The rate is so variable across countries. So China, for instance, the mortality was about 0.4%. They had 80-something thousand persons infected, about 3,000 plus died. But if you look at Italy, the death rate is huge. It's getting to 10%. So we just wonder why the difference and whether is it an issue of health systems, but then Italy didn't have a weak health system at all. Is it an issue of how aggressive you manage some of the complications? But there are certain things that we know for certain that I think the public should be aware of. In the first instance, if you have underlying comorbidities, if you have diabetes, if you have cardiovascular disease such as hypertension, if you are on any immunosuppressants, if you have uncontrolled HIV with a low CD4 count, you're very likely to have severe disease. But more importantly, if you are of an older age group, so for instance, people above the age of 70 are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from COVID than a younger person. People below the age of 40 years have a much higher chance of survival, a much higher chance of survival. So we've got these differences, and that's why when we say protect yourself, particularly if you have a risk factor, make sure you carry out the protocols that we have advised. Keep washing your hands. Do not engage in mass gatherings. Keep a safe distance. Disinfect your surfaces, and be aware, especially if you're elderly, be aware that if COVID gets you, there is the possibility that you may end up in hospital, and there's the possibility you might die. And that message really needs to go out. Yes, in the rest of the population, the mortality is pretty low. In some instances, it's less than 1%. If for the population, if you catch COVID, 80% of us will just have a mild to moderate illness. 20% will require to go into hospital. About 5% will require ICU. If you look at the Chinese data, for instance, 92% of those that had COVID fully recovered. But there are so many things we still don't understand. It looks like younger people, particularly children below the age of 8, don't seem to have severe illness at all. It looks like men, I'm sorry, Omini, but I'm afraid when it comes to COVID, you're the wrong sex. But men are twice as likely to be infected with COVID than women. So there are all these questions. But what I would say is we need to be prepared. People need to have that information. That's why I really agree with Professor Tomori. We've got to be transparent. We've got to be able to communicate effectively with the public. We've got to let people know what the risks are and the reasons why we're taking certain steps.
Okay, before I take on a jury, I know you were supposed to leave off. We're almost done with the program, so let me just say we end up with the program. Okay. Ultimately, where are we with the multi-sectoral approach? Is this fully in place?
So we are working very hard. As you know, the Presidential Task Force is made up of a multitude of ministers across the board. We have various sectors, humanitarian, security, etc. And we're working very harmoniously together. And more importantly, we are working very closely with the Ministry of Health and NCDC. We all know our roles. And the SGF is there for a purpose. He's representing Mr. President. So at the federal level, I think the structure is pretty clear. Everybody knows what he or she is supposed to do. There are certain things that we keep on changing. So for instance, the daily press conferences that we have, we've had really positive feedback. So it's something that we'll continue to engage the public with. When it comes to our meetings, we're now meeting almost on a daily basis. We're looking at the data. We're looking at where the cases are coming up. If there are challenges with testing, we're advising NCDC, you've got to open more labs, you've got to improve your contact tracing, etc. So at the federal level, I think the structure is pretty there. But at the state level, if you take out Lagos, for instance, I would say a lot of other states are still struggling to get on top of the issue. And my plea to the state governors is, I know they're worried about testing, but actually testing will not be the issue in the coming weeks. It's going to be isolation. Make sure you have isolation facilities prepared in your states. Because if the numbers start going up, the only way you can get on top of it is to take out those that are infected and put them in isolation so that they do not transmit to the rest of the populace. It will no longer be an issue of testing, because testing can be done in Abuja regardless of where the sample is coming from.
Well, Ajuri, briefly, do people really understand the enormity regarding stay-at-home directives?
Well, I think we really should commend our people on this, because I think our people have been outstanding in terms of complying with the directives. If you look very carefully at what we've seen in Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun State in particular, you will know that our people, for the most part, have done very, very well, with very few exceptions. So on that part, I think they have. For us, it's about ensuring that they sustain that, because all of us are in this together, and it's going to be our ability to effectively adhere to the directives and guidelines of those who have the information that others don't have, that will determine the extent to which and the speed in which we're able to deal with the spread of the virus. But I would need to point out something very quickly. Professor Dharma made some very important points about the needs for states to key in to what the federal interventions involve. And I just want to buttress that point in agreement by saying that within the parameters of what the president has directed, he has also directed the suspension of capital and interest payments of all federal and CBN loans, bailout funds, for example, to the states. So that's going to free up extra fiscal space for them to deal with the core issues that they need to deal with in their states, which is the payment of salaries, pensions, making sure that they make the right kinds of investment across healthcare and education and some of the other core infrastructural investments that the states need to make. On the other hand, we have, in addition to that, freeing up fiscal space, we've also put in place a mechanism in conjunction with some of the multilaterals we're working with. It's the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning laid it out that we're seeking $3.4 billion that we had contributed to the IMF to extract all of that. We'll see if we get 100% of it. Another $2.5 billion from the World Bank, I believe about approximately $1 billion of which would go to the states, and about $1 billion from the African Development Bank, about $7 billion in total. Now, the reason why that's important is because we're not going to know the exact figures of what we get until everything is finalized with the multilaterals. But the reason why it's important is that when we give those facilities to the states, for example, in developing their healthcare infrastructure and all of that, in conjunction with what we're doing with the interventions, it is coming attached with very stringent and verifiable monitoring and evaluation mechanisms that are conditioned from the World Bank that we're getting the facility from. I want to make that point because our people need to have confidence, of course, that when we make these interventions at the federal level to the states, that the states are being held accountable by the federal government to ensure that those funds are used for the purpose for which they're being sent. So in all, I would say that everything is moving along with great speed, but we do not want to sacrifice efficiency on the altar of speed. We want to get the speed right, we want to get the efficiency right, and ultimately we recognize that we're only going to get all of this right in a coordinated fashion if our people continue to key in the way that they're keying in. And we're quite optimistic moving forward.
Okay. Professor Dharma, in just maybe a minute or so, just what's your appeal to the business community not to continue to see this lockdown as maybe denying their livelihood, but some kind of national sacrifice? Briefly.
It is true that as Nigerians, our actions at individual level would impact positively or negatively on our collective health. So complying with the stay-at-home directive and the possible losses associated with such, I think, are part of the sacrifices that need to be done. But the federal government and the state governments also need to put a practical framework for implementing the palliatives to the businesses in order to cushion the negative impact of the losses arising from the lockdown. But importantly also, this crisis has provided us with an important opportunity to have a complete reassessment and evaluation of our healthcare delivery system, to develop a framework of public-private partnership and a national health policy to promote both public and private healthcare delivery in such a way that Nigerians can be treated in Nigeria and you don't need to go anywhere to be treated, because it is embarrassing that as elites, most of us, if we are sick, we go outside Nigeria. But many a times when you go outside the country, you meet experts who are Nigerians in those specialist hospitals. So I think it's an opportunity, and I'm using this to passionately call, particularly on the state governments and all the relevant stakeholders in the healthcare delivery system, to work as a team, develop a comprehensive healthcare delivery system in such a way that in the next 5 years, no Nigerian can venture and go to any country to seek for treatment, because literally in every field of human endeavor, particularly in healthcare, whenever you go outside this country, Nigerians are making waves everywhere in the world. May Allah bless Nigeria and Nigerians.
Professor Tomori, your last words at this moment before we wrap up.
Thank you very much. I want to make a pitch for Nigeria to support her scientists and researchers. A lot of the things that are going on right now, if we had had all the modelings and things you are hearing from outside, it's the scientists that are doing them. But we don't even provide information for our scientists. We don't provide them the facilities to which to work together. So as we're thinking of COVID and all that things, I want to make a pitch. Two things. One, it is time for us to look back and make use of our researchers and provide them the conducive environment that can make them come up with research and do the kind of research that needs to be done. We did it before. We had the conducive environment for me to become what I am. I'm a very proud Nigerian of what I've achieved in the area of science. But it was done all here. Primary, secondary, university, all was done in this country. And that's why I feel so passionate about the state we are now. We can go back to that one if we use our money rightly. All of these billions that are coming in, please don't forget research and researchers. Number two, the last point I wanted to make, sir, is the fact that let's get this information, the ability to go down to details, finding detailed information, make it available to people. I thank my colleagues who are now agreeing that there's no information that is too much to give to your people. When you give them the right information, they won't begin to speculate and give rumors. Finally, sir, we must make sure that I keep talking about testing. We have enough laboratories in this country, set up by foreign people. I think Nigeria has one of the largest number of gen experts that you can imagine. And yet we are still talking of building 4 labs, 3 labs, 5 labs, when there are at least 300 of such facilities scattered out all over this country. Why can't we make use of our local people, the private laboratory people, the government laboratory people? Let's work together instead of NCDC doing it alone.
Professor Oyewale Tomori, it was nice having you on Tuesday Live tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Professor Oyewale joined us from our Ibadan Network Center, and from our 24th studio, Professor Nasifi Dama. It was nice having you on Tuesday Live tonight. Thank you so much.
Very much, and may Allah bless Nigeria and Nigerians.
Dr. Sani Aliu, thank you so much. We have taken all your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And the SSG President on Public Affairs, thank you so much for being on Tuesday Live.
It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Okay. Well, to our callers, those who sent in tweets, we appreciate you. And for those who couldn't take their tweets, some other time we'll take your tweets. That's it of the program tonight. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
This is NTA International.
COVID-19 transmission is mostly through droplets from sneezing and saliva. The most effective way to protect yourself from the virus is to practice good personal hygiene. Wash hands with soap under running water or use an alcohol-based sanitizer if water is not available. Maintain at least 2 meters distance between yourself and anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Cover your mouth and nose with your elbow or tissue when you cough or sneeze. Dispose of the used tissue immediately. If you have traveled recently to a country with COVID-19 outbreak in the last 14 days and you have a fever, cough, or breathing difficulty, call NCDC toll-free numbers before going to the hospital. This message is from the National Orientation Agency.
You can follow us on all our social media platforms: Facebook at NTA Network News, Instagram at NTA Network, Twitter at NTA News Now, YouTube at NTA News Online, or visit www.nta.ng. For live streaming, visit www.nta.ng/live. Now, you can stay updated on the go, be it on your TV, iPhone, laptop, or iPad, or download the NTA mobile application from your Play Store or App Store. NTA, you can beat the rich.
Coronavirus specifically targets the respiratory system. Here are some characteristics of the COVID-19 virus, which you should be aware of. One, it's actually when you sneeze or you cough or you even spit, and you have the virus, and you're infected with the virus, it goes about 14 feet, much further than what had been previously estimated. It remains in the air for about 30 minutes after one has sneezed or coughed. So this is really bad news, and it can last on surface